Have you ever felt a strange feeling deep inside? Like you're meant for something more, something bigger than yourself? It's as if there's a voice whispering to your soul, telling you that you have a special purpose in this world. Well, you might be right. You might be one of the chosen ones, called by God for a higher purpose. Now, I know what you're thinking. Me? Chosen by God? That's crazy. But hear me out. Throughout history, there have been people who felt this call, this pull towards something greater. Think about it. Moses, a simple shepherd, led an entire nation to freedom. David, a young boy, became a great king. Even in modern times, we see ordinary people doing extraordinary things, guided by a force they can't quite explain. But how do you know if you're one of these people? How can you tell if God is calling you? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at 7 signs that might show you're chosen by God. These aren't just random ideas. They're based on stories from religious texts, experiences of spiritual leaders, and the lives of people who have felt this divine call. Let's start with the first sign. It's something that many people who feel called by God experience. It's a deep, unexplainable feeling that you're meant for something more. It's like a whisper in your heart, a gentle nudge pushing you towards a certain path. Imagine you're walking down a busy street. Everyone around you is rushing, focused on their own lives and problems. But you feel different. You look at the world and see more than just buildings and people. You see possibilities. You see ways to make things better. You feel a strong urge to help, to change things, to make a difference. This feeling doesn't go away. It stays with you day after day. This isn't just a passing thought or a fleeting emotion. It's a constant presence in your life. You might try to ignore it, to push it away, but it always comes back, stronger than before. It's like a soft voice in your mind, always reminding you that you're meant for something bigger. Now, this feeling isn't always clear. It's not like you wake up one day and suddenly know exactly what you're supposed to do with your life. It's more like a compass. It doesn't show you the whole map, but it points you in the right direction. You might not know where the path leads, but you feel a strong pull to follow it. This feeling can show up in different ways for different people. For some, it's a sense of discontent with the ordinary. You might have a good job, a nice home, a loving family, but still feel like something's missing. You can't shake off the feeling that there's more to life than this. For others, it might be a recurring dream or vision. Maybe you keep seeing yourself helping people in a far-off land. Or you have a vivid image of yourself speaking to a large crowd, sharing an important message. These dreams don't feel like normal dreams. They feel real, important, like they're trying to tell you something. Sometimes, this feeling comes with a sense of urgency. It's like you know deep down that you have an important role to play in the world. You feel a responsibility, a weight on your shoulders. But strangely, this weight doesn't drag you down. Instead, it lifts you up, gives you purpose, makes you feel alive. This feeling can also come with a deep sense of love and compassion for others. You find yourself caring deeply about people you've never met. You feel their pain, their struggles, their hopes, and you feel a strong desire to help them, to make their lives better in some way. Now, you might be thinking, but everyone feels like they want to do something important sometimes, right? And you're right. We all have moments where we want to change the world. But for those called by God, this feeling is different. It's not just a fleeting thought or a momentary inspiration. It's a constant presence, a driving force in their lives. Think about some of the great spiritual leaders and changemakers in history. People like Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., or Mahatma Gandhi. They all felt this deep, unshakable feeling that they were meant to do something important. They didn't always know exactly what it was or how they would do it, but they couldn't ignore the call. It drove them to do amazing things, to change the world in ways they could never have imagined. But here's the important thing to remember. Being called by God doesn't mean your life will be easy. In fact, it often means the opposite. You might face challenges, doubts, and obstacles. You might have to make difficult choices and sacrifices. But despite all this, the feeling persists. The call remains strong. So, if you've been feeling this way, if you have this persistent sense that you're meant for something more, pay attention. It might be the first sign that you're being called by God. Don't ignore it. Don't brush it off as just your imagination. Listen to that whisper in your heart. It might be the start of an incredible journey. Now, let's move on to the second sign that you might be called by God. This sign is all about how you relate to other people. It's about a deep, overwhelming sense of compassion that goes beyond normal kindness. When you're called by God, you start to see the world differently. It's like you're looking through God's eyes. Suddenly, you don't just see strangers on the street. You see brothers and sisters, fellow human beings with their own struggles, hopes, and dreams. You feel connected to them in a way you can't really explain. This compassion isn't just a fleeting feeling. It's not like feeling bad when you see a sad movie, then forgetting about it an hour later. No, this is a deep, lasting compassion that becomes a core part of who you are. You find yourself constantly thinking about others, worrying about their well-being, wanting to help them. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're walking down the street and you see a homeless person. Most people might feel a brief moment of pity, maybe give them some spare change, and then go on with their day. But if you're called by God, it's different. You don't just see a homeless person. You see a fellow human being who's struggling. You wonder about their story. What led them to this point? What are their hopes and dreams? How can you help not just for today, but in a way that could change their life? This compassion extends to everyone, not just people who are obviously in need. You start to see the hidden struggles in everyone around you. The coworker who always seems grumpy, you wonder if they're dealing with problems at home. The cashier at the store who never smiles, you think about how tough their job must be, dealing with difficult customers all day. But it's not just about feeling bad for people. This God-given compassion comes with a strong desire to help, to make things better. You find yourself looking for ways to ease other people's burdens, even in small ways. Maybe you start volunteering at a local shelter, or you make an effort to really listen when your friends talk about their problems, instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. This compassion can sometimes feel overwhelming. You might find yourself crying over news stories about people suffering in far-off countries. You might lose sleep worrying about problems in your community. It can be a heavy feeling, carrying all this concern for others. But here's the thing. Along with this deep compassion comes a sense of purpose. You start to realize that maybe this is why you're here. Maybe God has given you this big heart for a reason. You're not just feeling bad for people. You're being called to help them. This compassion often leads to action. People who are called by God don't just feel bad about the world's problems, they try to do something about them. Think about people like Francis of Assisi, who gave up a life of wealth to serve the poor, or Harriet Tubman, who risked her life again and again to help slaves escape to freedom. They were driven by a compassion so strong that they couldn't sit back and do nothing. Now, you might be thinking, but I'm not doing anything that big or important. And that's okay. Being called by God doesn't always mean doing huge, world-changing things. Sometimes it's about the small acts of kindness and compassion you show every day. Maybe you're the person your friends always turn to when they need someone to listen. Maybe you're known in your neighborhood as the one who always helps out when someone's in need. These might seem small, but they can make a big difference in people's lives. This compassion can also change how you see yourself. You might start to see your own problems differently. When you're focused on helping others, your own troubles often don't seem as big or important. This doesn't mean your problems disappear, but you gain a new perspective. You start to see your life as a tool to help others, not just as something for your own benefit. Sometimes, this compassion might lead you in unexpected directions. You might find yourself drawn to causes or people you never thought much about before. Maybe you suddenly feel a strong urge to help refugees or to work with children with special needs. These new interests might seem to come out of nowhere, but they're often a sign of God's call in your life. This deep compassion can also change how you see the world's problems. Instead of feeling hopeless or overwhelmed by all the suffering in the world, you start to see opportunities to make things better. You believe that change is possible, that love and kindness can make a real difference. This hope and optimism is another sign that you might be called by God. So, if you find yourself feeling this deep, constant compassion for others, pay attention. If you're always looking for ways to help, always concerned about others' well-being, it might be a sign. This compassion could be God's way of showing you your purpose, of guiding you towards the role you're meant to play in the world. Remember, this compassion isn't about being perfect or never getting frustrated with people. It's about having a heart that's open to others, a heart that sees the value in every person. It's about being willing to love others, even when it's hard or inconvenient. So, take a moment to think about how you relate to others. Do you find yourself constantly thinking about other people's well-being? Do you feel a strong urge to help, to make things better? Does your heart break for the suffering in the world? If so, you might be experiencing this second sign of being called by God. This compass of compassion could be pointing you towards your divine purpose. Let's move on to the third sign that you might be called by God. This sign is about wisdom and understanding that seems to come from beyond yourself. It's like suddenly having access to a well of knowledge and insight that you can't explain. Now, we're not talking about being the smartest person in the room or knowing lots of facts. This is a different kind of wisdom. It's a deep understanding of life, of people, of the world around you. It's the kind of wisdom that makes people stop and listen when you speak, because they sense there's something special about what you're saying. This wisdom often shows up in unexpected ways. You might find yourself giving advice to a friend and suddenly realizing you're saying things you never knew you knew. It's like the words are flowing through you from somewhere else. Your friend looks at you in surprise and says, "Wow, that's exactly what I needed to hear. How did you know?" Or maybe you're faced with a difficult decision. Everyone around you is confused, not sure what to do, but you have a clear sense of the right path forward. You can't always explain how you know, you just do. It's like you can see the bigger picture, understand things on a deeper level. This wisdom isn't just about having the right answers. It's also about asking the right questions. You might find yourself wondering about things that never bothered you before. Why are we here? What's the purpose of life? How can we make the world better? These big questions become important to you, and you start to see connections and meanings that others miss. Sometimes, this wisdom comes in the form of intuition or gut feelings. You just know things without being able to explain how. Maybe you feel strongly that you should take a certain job, even though it doesn't make sense on paper. Or you have a sudden urge to call a friend, only to find out they were in crisis and really needed someone to talk to. This kind of wisdom often comes with a sense of responsibility. You start to realize that this understanding isn't just for you. You feel a strong urge to share what you know, to help others see what you see. But it's not about showing off or proving you're smart. It's about using this wisdom to help others, to make the world a little bit better. Now, here's an important thing to remember. This wisdom doesn't mean you suddenly have all the answers. In fact, people who are truly wise often feel like they know less, not more. They become more aware of how much they don't know, how complex the world really is. This humility is actually a sign of true wisdom. This wisdom can show up in different areas of life. Maybe you have a special understanding of nature, able to see the intricate connections in the world around you. Or perhaps you have deep insights into people's emotions, able to understand and help with complex relationship problems. Some people find they have wisdom about spiritual matters, able to explain deep truths in ways that make sense to others. One way this wisdom often shows up is in the ability to see beyond the surface of things. While others might get caught up in arguments about who's right or wrong, you're able to see the deeper issues at play. You understand that most conflicts are about more than just the immediate problem. You see the fears, hopes, and needs that are driving people's actions. This wisdom can also give you a different perspective on time. You start to see how the past, present, and future are connected. You understand how actions today can have big impacts tomorrow. This long-term thinking helps you make better decisions and give better advice to others. Sometimes, this wisdom comes with a price. You might find that you see things others don't want to see or hear things others don't want to hear. This can be lonely sometimes. You might feel like you don't quite fit in, like you're seeing a different world than everyone else. But remember, this is often part of being called by God. You're being given this wisdom for a reason, even if it's not always easy to carry. This wisdom often grows over time. You might start noticing it in small ways at first, Maybe you're able to solve problems at work more easily, or you find yourself giving surprisingly good advice to friends. But as you lean into it, as you start to trust this inner wisdom, it often grows stronger. You might find yourself becoming a person others turn to for guidance and insight. Now, it's important to note that this wisdom isn't about being perfect or never making mistakes. In fact, people with true wisdom are often very aware of their own flaws and mistakes. They're always learning, always growing. They're not afraid to admit when they're wrong or to learn from others. This wisdom also often comes with a strong sense of justice and fairness. You might find yourself speaking up against things that are wrong, even when it's not popular or easy. You have a clear sense of right and wrong that goes beyond just following rules. You understand the spirit behind the rules, the deeper principles of justice and compassion. So, if you find yourself experiencing this kind of unexplainable wisdom, pay attention. If people often come to you for advice, if you find yourself understanding complex situations with surprising clarity, it might be a sign. This wisdom could be God's way of preparing you for the role you're meant to play in the world. Remember, this wisdom isn't about being better than others. It's a gift, a tool to be used for the good of all. If you're experiencing this sign, think about how you can use this wisdom to help others, to make the world a little bit better. That's often the reason why God gives us these gifts in the first place. So, take a moment to reflect. Have you experienced this kind of deep, unexplainable wisdom? Do you often know things or understand situations in ways you can't quite explain? Do people turn to you for insight and advice? If so, you might be experiencing this third sign of being called by God. These whispers of wisdom could be guiding you towards your divine purpose. Here are the next 3 sections of the script, continuing from where we left off. Have you ever felt like you were made for something special? Like there's a fire inside you that just won't go out? That's what we're talking about here. When God calls you, He often gives you a strong feeling that you have a unique purpose in this world. It's like you know deep down that you're here for a reason, even if you can't quite put your finger on what that reason is just yet. This sense of purpose isn't just a vague feeling. It's something that drives you forward, even when things get tough. You might find yourself drawn to certain causes or issues that others don't seem to care as much about. Maybe you feel a strong urge to help people in a specific way, or you have ideas about how to make the world a better place that just won't leave you alone. Think about it like this. Imagine you're a puzzle piece. You know you fit somewhere in the big picture, and you won't feel right until you find your place. That's kind of what this sense of purpose feels like. You might not know exactly where you fit yet, but you know you have a spot that's just for you. This feeling of purpose often comes with a sense of restlessness. You might feel like you can't just sit back and live an ordinary life. There's always something pushing you to do more, to be more. It's like God has planted a seed in your heart, and that seed is growing into a big, beautiful tree of purpose that you can't ignore. Remember, though, that finding your purpose is often a journey. It's not always clear right from the start. Sometimes, God reveals it to us bit by bit, like pieces of a map coming together. The important thing is to stay open and keep moving forward. Your purpose might unfold in ways you never expected, but that deep sense that you're meant for something special, that's a pretty good sign that God has His eye on you for something big. Now, let's talk about something that might sound a bit strange at first. Have you ever been in a really tough situation where everything seems to be going wrong, but for some reason, you feel okay? Like there's a calm inside you that doesn't make sense given what's happening around you? That's what we're getting at here. When God calls you, He often gives you a special kind of peace. It's not the kind of peace that comes when everything is perfect. No, this is a peace that shows up right in the middle of life's storms. It's like having an umbrella in a downpour. The rain is still falling, but somehow you're not getting soaked. This peace doesn't mean you won't have problems or that you'll always feel happy. Life can still be hard, and you'll still have tough days. But there's a difference. It's like there's a quiet voice inside you saying, "It's going to be okay. I've got this." Even when things look really bad on the outside, you have this sense that everything will work out in the end. Think about it like this. Imagine you're on a boat in the middle of a storm. The waves are crashing, the wind is howling, and it looks pretty scary. But deep down, you know the boat is strong and the captain knows what he's doing. That's kind of what this peace feels like. The storm is real, but so is your trust that you'll make it through. This kind of peace often surprises people. They might look at your life and think, how can they be so calm with all that's going on? But that's just it. This peace doesn't come from having an easy life. It comes from knowing that God is with you, guiding you, even when things are tough. Remember, this peace isn't about ignoring problems or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's a deep down assurance that no matter what happens, you're not alone. God is with you, and He's got a plan. That unshakable peace in the face of life's challenges, that's a pretty strong sign that God has called you for something special. Here's something interesting. When God calls you, He often puts a special kind of love in your heart. Not just any love, but a love that makes you want to help others more and more. It's like a flame that starts small but grows bigger over time, making you want to reach out and make a difference in people's lives. This isn't about just being nice or doing a good deed now and then. It's a deep, growing desire to serve others that becomes a big part of who you are. You might find yourself always looking for ways to help, even when it's not easy or convenient. It's like you can't help but want to make things better for the people around you. Think about it like this. Imagine you have a pair of special glasses that let you see the needs of others more clearly. When God calls you, it's like He gives you these glasses. Suddenly, you start noticing things you didn't see before. You see the person who needs a friend, the family that could use some help, or the cause that needs supporters. And not only do you see these needs, but you feel a strong pull to do something about them. This desire to serve often comes with a willingness to put others first. You might find yourself giving up your time, your money, or your comfort to help someone else. But here's the funny thing. Instead of feeling like you're losing something, you actually feel like you're gaining. There's a special kind of joy that comes from serving others, a fulfillment that you can't get any other way. Now, this doesn't mean you have to become a full-time charity worker or give away everything you own. Serving others can look different for everyone. Maybe for you, it means being a listening ear for friends in need. Or maybe it's volunteering at a local shelter or using your skills to help a good cause. The important thing is that you feel this growing desire to make a positive difference in the world around you. Remember, this desire to serve isn't about trying to earn God's love or approval. It's more like a natural overflow of the love God has put in your heart. It's like a river that's been filled to the brim and can't help but spill over, blessing everything around it. So if you find yourself with this growing urge to help and serve others, take note. It could very well be a sign that God is calling you to something bigger than yourself. Certainly. I'll continue with the next sections of the outline and add a conclusion, maintaining the same style and depth. Now, let's talk about the fourth sign that you might be called by God. This sign is all about perseverance, the ability to keep going even when things get tough. It's about having a strength that goes beyond your own willpower. When you're called by God, you often face challenges. It's not an easy path, but what sets you apart is your ability to keep moving forward, no matter what obstacles come your way. It's like there's a fire inside you that just won't go out. Think about it. Have you ever faced a situation that seemed impossible? Maybe you were working towards a goal, and everything seemed to be going wrong. Most people would give up at this point. But if you're called by God, you find a way to keep going. It's not that you don't feel discouraged or tired. You do. But something inside you refuses to quit. This perseverance isn't just stubbornness. It's not about forcing your way through by sheer willpower. Instead, it's a deep, unshakable belief that what you're doing matters. You keep going because you know, deep in your heart, that your actions have a purpose. Sometimes, this perseverance shows up in everyday life. Maybe you're the one who always finishes what they start, even when it's hard. Or perhaps you're known for sticking with people, supporting them even when everyone else has given up. This steadfastness is a reflection of God's own faithfulness. Other times, this perseverance is tested in big ways. You might face opposition from others who don't understand your calling. You might encounter setbacks that make your goals seem impossible. But instead of breaking you, these challenges seem to make you stronger. Each obstacle becomes a chance to prove your commitment, to show that your calling is real. This kind of perseverance often comes with a strange kind of joy. Even when things are tough, you find moments of peace and happiness. It's like you can see beyond the current struggles to the bigger picture. You know that these challenges are part of your journey, part of your growth. Now, this doesn't mean you never get tired or discouraged. You do. But what sets you apart is your ability to bounce back. You might have moments of doubt or fear, but they don't last. You find strength from somewhere deep inside, or perhaps from somewhere beyond yourself. This perseverance also shows up in your faith. You might face times when God feels distant, when your spiritual life feels dry. But you keep praying, keep believing, keep seeking. You understand that faith is not just about feelings, but about commitment. So, if you find yourself showing this kind of perseverance, if you keep going even when things get tough, if you have a strength that surprises even you, it might be a sign. This perseverance could be God's way of preparing you for the important work you're called to do. Let's move on to the fifth sign that you might be called by God. This sign is about having a perspective that goes beyond the here and now. It's about seeing life through the lens of eternity. When you're called by God, you start to see things differently. The day-to-day concerns that consume most people don't seem as important to you. Instead, you're focused on things that have lasting value, things that matter in the grand scheme of things. This eternal perspective shows up in how you make decisions. While others might be focused on short-term gains or immediate pleasures, you're thinking about long-term impacts. You ask yourself, how will this decision affect eternity? What really matters in the end? This doesn't mean you ignore the present. In fact, you might find yourself more fully engaged in the moment because you understand how each moment connects to the bigger picture. You see the eternal significance in everyday actions and choices. This perspective also changes how you see people. You don't just see them as they are now, but as who they could become. You understand that everyone has eternal value, regardless of their current situation. This leads to a deep respect and love for all people. Sometimes, this eternal perspective gives you a sense of peace in difficult times. You're able to see beyond current troubles to the bigger story God is writing. This doesn't mean you don't feel pain or sadness, but you have a hope that goes beyond circumstances. You might also find yourself thinking a lot about legacy. Not in a selfish way, but in terms of the impact you'll leave behind. You want your life to count for something beyond yourself. You're focused on building things that will last, on making a difference that will echo into eternity. This eternal perspective often comes with a strong sense of purpose. You understand that your life is part of a bigger story, a cosmic plan. This gives even small actions a sense of meaning and importance. So, if you find yourself thinking beyond the immediate, if you're focused on eternal values and lasting impact, it might be a sign. This echo of eternity in your heart could be God's way of aligning you with His eternal purposes. Now, let's discuss the sixth sign that you might be called by God. This sign is about having a deep, burning desire to make the world a better place. It's more than just wanting to do good. It's a passion that drives everything you do. When you're called by God, you're not content with the status quo. You look at the world around you, and you see not just what is, but what could be. You have a vision of a better world, and you feel compelled to work towards it. This burning for betterment shows up in different ways. Maybe you're always looking for ways to help people in your community. Or perhaps you're drawn to big, global issues like poverty, injustice, or environmental problems. Whatever it is, you can't just sit back and do nothing. This passion isn't just a fleeting feeling. It's a core part of who you are. You find yourself thinking about these issues all the time, looking for solutions, trying to figure out how you can make a difference. Sometimes, this burning for betterment leads you to take risks. You might find yourself speaking up against injustice, even when it's not popular. Or you might make life changes that others don't understand because you're following this call to make things better. This passion often comes with creativity. You see possibilities that others miss. You come up with innovative solutions to problems. You're not satisfied with, that's just how things are. You're always asking, how could things be better? You might also find that this burning for betterment gives you energy. When you're working on something you believe will make the world better, you feel alive. You can work long hours without getting tired because you're driven by this inner fire. This passion for betterment isn't just about big, dramatic changes. You understand that small actions can have big impacts. You find joy in the little things you do each day to make the world a bit better, brighter, or kinder. So, if you find yourself constantly driven to make things better, if you have a passion for positive change that won't let you rest, it might be a sign. This burning for betterment could be God's way of using you to bring more of His goodness into the world. Let's talk about the seventh and final sign that you might be called by God. This sign is about having a deep, personal connection with God. It's about feeling God's presence in your life in a powerful and undeniable way. When you're called by God, your relationship with Him becomes the center of your life. It's not just about going to church or following rules. It's about having a real, living connection with the Creator of the universe. This connection shows up in different ways for different people. Maybe you feel God's presence strongly when you pray. It's like you're having a conversation with a close friend. You don't just talk to God, you listen as well. And sometimes, you hear Him speaking to your heart in ways that are hard to explain to others. Or perhaps you see God's hand at work in your life all the time. You notice coincidences that don't seem like coincidences at all. You see how things work out in ways that can only be explained by God's intervention. This connection to God often comes with a deep sense of peace and joy. Even when life is hard, you have an inner calmness that comes from knowing you're not alone. You trust God in a way that goes beyond just believing He exists. You know Him personally. Sometimes, this connection leads you to do things that don't make sense to others. You might make decisions based on what you feel God is telling you, even if it goes against conventional wisdom. This isn't about being reckless, but about trusting God's guidance above all else. This deep connection with God also changes how you see the world. You start to see everything through the lens of God's love. You understand that every person is precious to God, and that changes how you treat people. You might also find that your desires start to align more with God's desires. The things that are important to God become important to you. You want what He wants, and that shapes your goals and dreams. This connection to God isn't always easy. Sometimes you might go through periods where God feels distant. But even in those times, your faith remains strong. You hold on to your relationship with God, knowing that He is faithful even when you can't feel His presence. So, if you find yourself experiencing this deep, personal connection with God, if your relationship with Him is the driving force in your life, it might be a sign. This connection to the Creator could be the clearest indication that you are indeed called by God for a special purpose. We've journeyed through the 7 signs that you might be called by God, from the whisper of the divine in your heart to the compass of compassion guiding your actions, from the whispers of wisdom beyond your own understanding to the path of perseverance that keeps you going, from the echo of eternity shaping your perspective to the burning desire for betterment that drives you forward, and finally, to that deep, personal connection with the Creator that underpins it all. If you've recognized these signs in your life, or even some of them, it's possible that you're being called by God for a special purpose. But remember, being called isn't about being perfect or having it all figured out. It's about being willing to listen, to grow, and to step out in faith. Being called by God is both a great honor and a great responsibility. It means that the Creator of the universe has chosen you to play a unique role in His plan. But it also means that you're being asked to step up, to be more than you thought you could be. So what do you do if you think you're being called? First, don't ignore it. Pay attention to these signs in your life. Reflect on them. Pray about them. Talk to people you trust about what you're experiencing. Second, be patient. Understanding God's call on your life is often a process. It might not all become clear at once. Be open to how God might be leading you, even if it's not what you expected. Third, start where you are. You don't need to wait for some big, dramatic moment to start living out your calling. Look for ways to serve, to show compassion, to make a difference right where you are. Finally, remember that you're not alone. God doesn't just call us and then leave us to figure it out on our own. He walks with us, guides us, and gives us the strength we need to fulfill our calling. Being called by God is a journey. It's not always easy, but it's always worthwhile. It's about becoming the person God created you to be and doing the work He prepared for you to do. So if you've seen these signs in your life, take heart. You might just be one of the chosen ones, called by God for a special purpose. Embrace that calling, live it out, and watch how God works through you to bring more of His love, His wisdom, and His goodness into the world. Remember, the world needs people who have come alive to their calling. As you step into yours, you'll not only find fulfillment for yourself, but you'll also be part of bringing hope, healing, and positive change to others. That's the beautiful thing about being called by God. As you answer that call, you become a channel of His love and grace to the world around you.